series intended to review what a board member does, what the role requires, and what you end up doing as a board member, as well as looking into what it means to be a candidate and the election calendar and all the requirements there. So I will go through a little bit here and give you some information on how you can ask questions, etc. This academy, as we said, is really to promote the culture of community service that we know exists in the community. It's here to build understanding in the community about elected leadership roles and securing elected office. Montara Water and Sanitary District is just community members are basically needed. We wanted to reach out and provide sort of an overview of what it means to serve in a role like this. So tonight, if you'd like to ask a question, you should be able to chat to me, Allison. I'm one of the hosts. I will strive to answer in chat or verbally. And before we step forward here into the next slide, I know Scott, our president, would like to call the meeting to order. So Scott, would you like to go ahead and take that action?
All right. Thank you, Allison. Yes, this is a special meeting of the Montara Water and Sanitary District Board, and because it is a publicly noticed meeting, I'm going to call this meeting of the District Board of Directors to order. It's July 28th, 2021. It's 6:35 p.m. And Tracy, could I ask for a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Decker?
Here.
Director Harvey?
Here.
Director Lohman?
Here.
Director Slater Carter?
She may be on mute, but I know she's here.
Present.
Terrific. So for my president's statement, I'm just going to thank you all for joining us tonight. Like special thanks to Allison and Clemens and staff for pulling this together, and a special thank you to former board members who are joining in to participate and share their thoughts tonight. With that, do we have any oral comments for anything that's not on the agenda? If you do, raise your hand, and if not, we'll move on into the agenda. And we go to new business item 1, Elected Community Service Academy Session 1, Board Roles and Responsibilities. And Allison, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so as we move forward, again, I'll just mention, please feel free to chat to me. We're having a few more folks join in. Right now, I'm just going to give this over to Clemens so he can give an overview of the district so that we're all on the same terms. So Clemens, if you would step in and just cover this slide and the next one for me.
Yeah, first of all, also thanks to everyone who's participating tonight. Special thanks to you, Allison, for guiding us through this. This is unusual. And before I spend too many words on what it is that we're actually doing, I want to encourage everyone to look at our website. We actually put some workshops on earlier this year, one very specifically about our water system and one specifically about what we're doing on the sewer side. So there is much more information than we can deliver tonight. So just briefly, we were formed in 1958, and that was to Montara Moss Beach local sewage. With that comes the jurisdiction over collection of garbage. That is handled through a contract with Recology currently. And in 2003, the water service was added, and that was done through essentially community purchasing the privately owned, and it was really poorly managed local water system. Next slide, Alison. So just going into briefly what it is that we're doing. Of course, on the water side, sewer side, we're taking samples. We're maintaining pipes in the ground. That means we're putting new pipes in the ground, projects, for example. We're fixing stuff. We have a number of treatment plants on the water side that we maintain, many wells that produce also additional water that need to be visited daily. There is billing that needs to take place. and much more that I'm probably not listing right now. It's a variety of things that our staff handles every day, and we're here. If you're on vacation or not, we're maintaining the system, making sure water flows, sewage flows in the other direction, and happy to provide the service every day. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Next slide.
All right.
Okay.
All right. This is me taking over again. So who is elected to serve our community? So this is just a summary, really focused on the more local and state offices. Of course, we've got the 13th Senate District, 22nd Assembly District, San Mateo County District 3, Don Horsley, Mid-Coast Community Council, and of course, the more local agencies here in the Montara Moss Beach community. So we wanted to highlight that these are your local representatives. It's not a huge number of agencies, but they're vital to representing the community that resides here and having a voice in decisions that are made for services in the community. And we just like to highlight that these folks are all available to you. These are offices that could be filled at different points in time as we look at elected community service here in the community. What does an elected official do? So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to sort of reflect on this. The first order of business is normally the assumption, and the role is to ensure community members' interests are represented. And what does that mean? How do we do that? Attend meetings, discuss, direct, and vote on decisions, policies, and actions. And the other piece to this, of course, is not only those actions of attending meetings, discussing and really getting into some of the nitty-gritty of decisions that need to be made, but also taking that information back to the community so that they have a two-way street, information that's accessible to them by those elected officials if they can't attend a meeting, especially in this community. The ability to walk down the street and answer questions directly about the actions, policies, and decisions that are being made at a board meeting level is invaluable part of what an elected official does. I'm adding a little quote here. It was a really interesting perspective provided when I was speaking to some of the directors. Thomas Jefferson himself really focused on the fact agencies are important, that keeping local control or local government decisions close to the people who are governed is sort of key to making sure that we're not having corruption, plunder, waste. It really is an effective and sort of tight operation to really keep that government close by. It certainly has proven true for many statesmen since, and continues to be a sort of a really important factor in local decision-making and local government. So my first director I'm calling on tonight is Jim Harvey. I'm hoping he will provide us a little bit of an perspective on his 21 years of service. He's currently elected as a director for Montara Water and Sanitary District. By all the different discussions when I was preparing this, 35 years with Stanford Hospital, but also a founding member of the Water Improvement Association. So I am playing a little bit of, we're reversing roles tonight. I might have a timer going. If you've come to a public meeting before, you members of the public making public comment frequently have or former directors. But Jim, would you unmute yourself and give us a little perspective on what you remember most about a board decision and your role, your contribution as a board member?
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are unmuted and I can hear you. Go ahead.
So when I moved here in '85, I noticed the water bill and I thought, my gosh, the water company is owned by an out-of-state entity, and our payments go to out of state to pay investors and executives. And I thought, this is crazy. So I hooked up with Peter Decker and Gary Warhaftig, and we got going with the Montara Moss Beach Water Improvement Association to keep citizens' utilities under control. And see how we can help the community. And then a couple of years later, I was attending the MWSD meetings. I came to a few meetings, and Catherine noticed me sitting in the audience. And at that point, a director dropped out or left, had to leave. And so she asked me if I would join. So I was appointed. And then the next year I ran for election. That was 18 years ago, I think. I just feel that you know, it's important to get involved and, you know, not let people do it to you, but get things done yourself and help the community and provide a safe source of water and sewer treatment. And I think it's always been exciting. And when we bought out the system from Cal-Am, it was a really exciting thing to do. The vast majority of people supported us. So I encourage you to you know, get involved in this. And you know, seats for election come and go. And if you're interested, you know, to talk to some of the board members and get involved and serving your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and Jim, I really loved your statement that really the board is there to support the staff and deliver on the mission statement about what the agency is for. So really, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Sure. So the next item here is really to reflect on what is one part of a board activity, a board member's obligation and action that they take at board meetings. Setting policy is really part of the role of the district. It's how you achieve the mission of the agency. What policies are considered? Well, here at the Water and Sanitary District, you have district code. This is the code that basically sets all of the regulations for customers and how billing is done and how connections are made to the system. It's really sort of the structure that maintains a cohesive system, and changes are made frequently to that code adopted by the board. There is reserve policies on how you manage the finances of the district, how you ensure that you have a policy that sets an expectation. We have resolutions that are about consultant contracts, personal services, how you bring on consultants and other services to support the staff because you can't maintain all the staff, and how you manage acquiring those services under a policy that's very clear for the public. And conduct and reimbursement of expenses for board members. Board members are all held to a fairly high expectation in terms of managing public funds and representing their interests in those activities. So there are many more. They are led typically by discussion at the board level or at staff level, where it's of interest to the organization to develop those policies and direction. Moving on, we've got one of our former directors here for Montara, Bill Huber. He served for 5 years from 2012 to 2017 and ran for and was elected to an open seat. And Bill, I'd love you to talk about your campaign effort, your time on the board. If you'll unmute yourself, I'm going to give you your shining 3 minutes or so of time. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, there we are. Go ahead.
Good evening. My campaign was actually pretty simple. My campaign strategy was simply that I knocked on the door of every person that I thought would vote in the upcoming election, walking up and down every street in the district. I had one campaign poster that I put on the back of my pickup truck, and I moved that around every day. I also promoted the campaign of Dwight Wilson as I walked door to door. So that was basically the strategy, just identify who's voting and try to talk to them. So I would also like to quote Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein was born and raised in California. He's an American journalist, political analyst, New York Times columnist, and the host of the Ezra Klein Show podcast. He is a co-founder of Vox and formerly served as the website's editor at large. And to quote Ezra Klein, most people don't want to participate in politics all that much. They will participate some of the time when something they really care about is at stake. And otherwise, they want to live their lives and have governance done well by other people, end quote. One of the previous slides, who is elected to serve our community, some of our elected officials are listed. My guess is that if all the people who voted in the last election were asked who their elected officials are, you would find that most people would be hard pressed to correctly answer even one person per board. What I have found during my campaign walks was that with the possible exception of retired persons like myself, most are simply too busy with earning an income and raising a family to pay much attention to who their elected representatives are, much less to run for elected office. So any outreach to get more people running for office will have only a marginal effect. You can't create a culture of community service as long as there as an entrenched incumbency. Catherine Slater Carter was first elected in 1995. She's been on the board of the MWSD and its predecessor, MSD, for over a quarter of a century. Scott Boyd started in 1996 or 97, so he is at or near the quarter century mark also. Jim Harvey has been on the board since 2004, the inception of the MWSD, for a total of 17 years. Rick Lohman was on the Granada Sanitary District, later renamed the Granada Community Services District, from 2004 until 2017 or 18, 13 or 14 years before being elected to the MWSD board in 2018. His combined total is 16 or 17 years. Peter was first appointed by the other 4 board members in 2019. He will be up for election in 2022. All 5 directors live in the unincorporated community of Montara. None live in the Moss Beach or Pillar Ridge service areas. Our community needs and deserves new directors that can examine our issues with new eyes. I have found that it is almost impossible to persuade someone to run for the MWSD board under the present circumstances, and it wasn't for lack of trying. If you are truly committed to getting more people to run for MWSD office, you will need to do 2 things. 1, institute term limits as recommended by the 2016 San Mateo County Grand Jury Report on Special Districts. As I have already stated, 3 board members have served since the beginning of the formation of the MWSD, and one has had comparable service of over 15 years. Only 1 board member has served less than 1 term. 2, go to district elections, something that you may be forced to do by litigation. Unless you do these 2 things, the pool of willing and able persons to run for a seat on MWSD is very limited. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your perspective. It's always nice to hear different perspectives from directors, current and former. I did want to highlight also, I know that you had great things to say about focusing on staff retention and the budget during your time. And those are, critical elements of what a district director will have to focus on. Certainly has ensured that we have good staff retention here at the district. And Clemens will speak to that a bit later as well. So thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. I do know we have a question from Marilyn, and I hope that I can get that answered here in a little bit. So it's going to move us forward. So budget, that's another element of course, what gets discussed at a board of directors level. And we have different subcommittees that focus on setting the budget. Budget here at the district is what looks like a complicated set of figures and sheets, but in reality operates very much like your home or another budget. They are all the expenses broken down into some fairly simple categories. So the accountant actually prepares all of that so that you can ask questions. Board members spend a fair amount of time looking at those details and ensuring that the expenses and the checks that are paid are actually justified and they have all of their questions answered before bills are paid or expenses are incurred. And I'm actually going to bring up next our current treasurer, Peter Decker, who was appointed in 2019 and elected last year, 2 years of service, although a longer time here in the community. I loved this quote when we were talking that he was born in Holland, where water is so present, and it sort of has informed his interests. So Peter, if you'll unmute yourself, would you give us a little perspective on budget, finance, your role as a director?
Thank you, Allison, and welcome everybody. I'm so happy that we have a good participation tonight. Unlike Bill's experience, my election was rather uneventful. There was no opponent, so I was elected in a very easy manner, which now leads me to believe that we really need people to step up to come and help us in the Montara Water Sanitary District as a board member. I want to say that I am very much enjoying my role on the board. Being a board member is an intellectual challenge, initially to get to know the system, to get to know the manager, to get to know all the board members. But as you go along, you find out there are things that you're interested in, that you would like to look further into. In my case, that was the finances. I have a background in international trading and also in finance, and that took my attention. As Jim said previously, the Montara Moss Beach Water Improvement Association was my first step in the direction of having to deal with water. As Jim said, the citizens' utilities was so bad, and our presentations in front of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission were such fights that I decided definitely our community needs to step up and get this water right under control. It is not good enough to just perform a function without ever doing the improvements or without ever thinking about the future, which was the case with citizens, and that has changed. Other than that, I must say that all the board members that I have encountered are very serious about serving the community. And as you can see from the number of years that they have lived in this community, they are fighting for the community. And I am to do the same in the time that I have left on the board of the Montara Water and Sanitary District. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Moving us forward, another aspect of what the board does undertake is setting rates. The rates, as you would imagine, are really the revenues of the district. They are the foundation of all the district's financing. The rates that are set and the rates that come in are how you would manage to provide debt to finance larger projects. And rates are always also a method of assisting with water conservation and consumer behavior, other consumer behavior. For example, if you set a rate that's higher on the garbage services for the size of the can, you will motivate folks to reduce their size, their can size, etc. And it's definitely a discussion point. The board is always very aware of the need for those rates to be fair and reasonable, and to not outprice the residents who reside in the community, but also to balance that with the needs of the district and what services must be provided, and ensuring the staff have support for the work that needs to be done. So just definitely another aspect of work. If I move forward, I think Bob might have a perspective on setting rates and other efforts. Bob was a 20-year director here for Montara Water and Sanitary from 1993 to 2013. In fact, I think that would have been, he was elected to the sanitary district before it became a water district. So Bob, if you can unmute yourself, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you describe a role of an elected board member and what you recall of your time on the board, and maybe even rate increase discussions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I only served 20 years, so I guess I'm only a 20% Century person. The role of a board member is, it's like running your own house with a budget. You need budgets for day-to-day activity. You need budgets for emergency. You need budgets funding for long-term. And sometimes you're faced with expenses and you either have to give up current expenses or reduce them in order to pay for them, or you have to acquire additional funds through loans. And while on a much larger scale, that is what you need to do, and you need to be able to explain that to the public. My time on the board was, it might have been too long for someone's on the board for 20 years, but I spent it focusing on the budgets and the expenditure. Sometimes that was not an easy task to do. You had to spend money, but in every one of those, we, the board, were able to explain why. And I have this theory that people want $1 worth of benefits and they want to only pay 75 cents. And that does not work in a private household. It doesn't work anywhere else, and it doesn't work on a board. But the difficulty is to explain that. We have to explain that to people. They may not like the decision, but if we explain why we're doing it, that's the responsibility of the board. One of those examples is the biggest time that I was on there. It was the SAM treatment expansion and the acquisition of the Citizens Utility. For the plant expansion, we had issues and were not able to participate. We were able then eventually to be able to participate, but we had to come up with money immediately, which required, and I was president, a 69% rate increase on the sewer side to be able to participate so that we could eliminate the moratorium. Now, we lowered it the next year significantly. It wasn't quite 69%, but during that first year, we had to quickly get the money so we could end the moratorium. And so those are some of the decisions. And I had no trouble explaining it. I didn't like it myself. But so that's part of the board duties. And amongst the board members, it's not always an agreement. The board members don't always agree, but I always made an attempt to explain my position and why. And when another board member had additional data that I didn't have, I was more than willing to change. And sometimes I had more than they did and they changed. But that's what a board is supposed to do. And the board has to focus on public interest and all the information available to make smart decisions, not to ignore some because they're convenient. The ultimate responsibility is to inform the public about those decisions. They're not always popular, but the board should be able to explain them and the reasons for those decisions. Board decisions are based on benefits, costs, and impact to the whole community. It should never be to support a personal agenda or desire. An example of that was, since Bill talked about the Centurions on our board, when Bill was on there for 5 years, he and a group external worked very hard to try to disband the board so that the water assets that we have were going to be shipped over to CCWD. And as Jefferson said, the further you get away, the less representation you get. And that's specifically what is not right with any board member. They have a specific agenda that is personal, what they want. That is not a valid position to be on the board. The board is to serve the entire community, even the ones that don't like you. But it's the benefit of the board. That's what has to happen. So, and yes, I was known to have an attitude. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your perspective. Always very good to hear. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move us forward here. So another aspect, of course, of the board's work, it's less frequent than I have seen in other districts, but approving contracts. So the district definitely undertakes sewer improvements and spot repairs. Those are contracts that are set for the year. Frequently when this comes about, the outside, the external consultant, our engineering consultant, Newt Engineering, will frequently prepare all the bid documents to ask for bids. We'll review all of them and we provide documentation comparing those bids so that the board has adequate information and knows that all of the responsive bidders have actually been reviewed, all of the materials they provided to offer, to respond to that opportunity to do this work is reviewed, and they can be analyzed and compared so that the board can make a valid decision about awarding a contract. So that does happen with some frequency, not every month, but I think a few times a year to ensure that things are getting done. Operations maintenance is undertaken by the district. So the next one here, which is always a fun one, for the board, legal discussions and decisions. There certainly are a number of legal discussions and decisions that come up. They arise all the time in all aspects of the district's work. Those can be both about the work being done. It could be pending or potential litigation. You frequently will see closed session references, such as you see here, existing, anticipated. And other, when you're dealing with real property or other issues, we rely heavily on our legal counsel. You can see another reference to current litigation. So it's not anything to be taken lightly, and it really does require a lot of thoughtful discussion amongst the board members with legal counsel and the general manager to have a discussion and direction in which way the district should proceed with all of those areas of concern. I'm going to ask Catherine now, current board member, 26 years of service, elected in 1995, still to present, and again, elected to the sanitary board before the water district or water system was purchased. Catherine, if you can unmute yourself and really speak to us about a couple of these items we talked about, the community, etc.
Well, thank you. I want to thank everyone who's here and those who hopefully will be watching this in the future for taking the time to be involved in local government. Local government is the most important thing really in your daily life. The further away from you it gets, the bigger and it gets, the less impact and influence you can have on it. At the same time, I was on Montara Water and Sanitary District, and I also was on the Mid-Coast Community Council for 8 years. I have always made it an important part of my public service to talk to people, introduce myself, and ask them what they think about things, because we're not here, as was said earlier, to represent our own personal interests. We are here to make sure that our districts, our local communities are fairly represented by the larger ones. And we are the only group that speaks only for Montara and Moss Beach citizens. And I like to think of Montara and Moss Beach as twin communities, sort of joined at the mountain. And so we have a priority to listen to the community. And as Bob said, that has to do with our plans and projects going forward. I have never spoken to anyone, and that includes most recently, but also across all the years I've been involved in service, that wanted to be absorbed or connected or I'm sorry, I'm looking for the word, consumed by the water district to the south. The most common word that I get is, we paid for it, it's ours. And I talk to people about my ideas and ask them for what their ideas are. The most important things for a board member is you have to follow the Brown Act, which means no side talking and decision making out of the public venue. We have to be transparent. Our records need to be transparent. People need to know they can trust us when they watch our meetings, that we're not making side deals out of the back to try and implement our own personal preferences. And one of the things that we have worked on for the district have made our district a better place. We are the only district on the peninsula that has our own water supply that is not tied to the Hetch Hetchy system with its extreme rate increases. We have been able, because the district made the sacrifice, the voters knowingly voted for purchasing the water district, we have been able to keep our rates down and our service very local and with excellent quality water. We have an excellent crew. We have an excellent management, and we have an excellent board. And yes, we have been trying, I've run unopposed for many elections. And as Bill said, it's not for lack of trying to get people to be involved. Elections are one of the most important parts of a district. That's where the potential of the district is worked out in the public, and the public gets to vote for it. But of course, the people running for the seats need to be honest when they're running and not switch their position after the election. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I know that I can't imagine the number of challenging decisions that have come before all of you as you've been on the board for quite a number of years. So I am going to, I'm going to move on here, but I do know that we had a question, and I'm wondering if Christine, our legal counsel, can help answer this question. Are you prepared, Christine? Can you unmute yourself? All right. I do know that one of the audience members asked, what's the legal and financial liability for a director? Do you have a simple answer for that?
Not sure it's simple, but that is a good question. And if I remember correctly, we had that issue come up. I don't recall. Generally, there's no personal liability for a director. Generally, they're protected by governmental immunity, which is an important concept that board members, I think some of the current, even the former directors may have had experience with. Generally, there is not personal liability, but of course, as we all know, the law always has certain exceptions. Again, I will say it's governed by the law regarding governmental immunity.
Right.
So it depends on, yeah.
It depends on what the situation is, I'm sure, but generally,
yes,
they're not exposed. They're not.
If I can add that I asked that very same question the first year I was elected. And that was the answer I got, that essentially we are indemnified as long as we are working under the within the framework of the law. And we are indemnified.
Great, thank you. All right. I do know, let me just move us forward. Another aspect of being on the board is representing the district. The elected officials tend to be assigned to represent the district, their elected area, on other boards or committees. In particular, for Montara, there's a California Special Districts Association, which basically represents a variety of other special districts and brings issues up to the state and federal level for issues of concern that are shared amongst various different special districts throughout the state. San Mateo County Local Agency Formation Committee, LAFCO, that tends to have a representative that comes from the agency, sits at those meetings to ensure that nothing is occurring that impacts the district. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast-Side as the actual sewer treatment joint authority down the coast. We actually have 2 board members from Montara that sit on the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast-Side board. There's also, as I mentioned previously, there are subcommittees, finance committee, ad hoc committees on specific issues. And of course, every board member does tend to be put in a position or be chosen to go and represent the district at other meetings of elected bodies and agencies. It certainly is a frequently a task of a board member to go and represent the district at a different meeting or just to be present to listen to other activities that might have an impact. I'm going to ask Rick, who actually has experience certainly of being on different boards, to please unmute himself. Rick is a 3-year elected member of the board here. I certainly know you've had some other elected positions and you have sat on many of these additional boards, either as a representative of the district or in its your own seat. Do you want to reflect on your experience here and the work you do as a board member?
Sure, I'm going to take a slightly different approach. First of all, I'm probably better known in the community as the husband of Barbara Lohman, who was a high school teacher here for 25 years. And probably all the younger members of our communities out here were probably all students of hers. So I hope you all liked her. I started off in Granada. We lived in Miramar down there. I moved here with zero interest in politics. When I've been in other communities, I had no idea who any of my local water district people were. My hope was that everything works, water comes out of the tap, the toilet's flushed, I'm happy, move on. I got started in politics when back in the good old days, 30 years ago, the supervisors and the Coastal Commission weren't as protective as they are now. And there were 2 very strange rulings within a block of my house. And I said, whoa, these are wrong. I'll go down to the supervisors and explain it, and they'll fix the problems. Well, that was my rude awakening in politics. I was basically told, who in the hell am I and what am I doing here? So I said, well, what can I do here? And that was the 2nd year of the Mid-Coast Council, Mid-Coast Community Council. So I said, what the heck, I'll see what's happening with them. The Mid-Coast Council was a great group because they actually created things like transportation standards, community standards, many of which are still in effect today. So I joined the Granada board after a while, and we fought hard and actually got parks to the Granada community. That was the first time in the history of San Mateo County that any special district added new powers. Granada was just a sewer district, and they got parks powers, and now are creating parks all over the place in Granada. I think that was great. One benefit from having long-term members are for any kind of county or state office, you have to have members who have been around for a while and have made contact for a while. The only reason I got on LAFCO, which makes a lot of special district decisions, is that I had worked for years and years and years to get there. So that's an advantage to communities having some members who have been around for a while. I think the biggest obstacle I've seen from people joining is people I've chatted with say, I don't know anything about water and sewer. How can I possibly get on the board? I don't know anything. Well, first of all, nobody knows anything when they start. And that's why we have probably the best staff on the coast here, is that's how you learn. You learn from our great staff, our consultants. You don't have to create knowledge out of nothing. You go to board meetings and the facts are presented to you to make decisions. So I think, as Catherine said, our great advantage here is that we are totally independent of anybody else in water. We'll match our water against Hetch Hetchy, San Francisco, and anybody else's. And not only that, but it's all ours because everybody here bought it. And that's a big thing. The big political thing that's going on now is many big agencies and folks in the community are trying to wipe Montara off the face of the map and merge us into Half Moon Bay. If any of you folks out there are following the lawsuits and the prior history of Half Moon Bay and the decisions they've made, maybe you don't want to be merged into Half Moon Bay. When I was asked to run for the board here and did my stints in front of the post office and walking around, I'd start my little speech where I'm here to defend Montara from being merged into Half Moon Bay and maintain our independence. Halfway through my speech, people said, okay, that's fine, you got my vote, and they'd walk away. So when I left, we left Miramar to come here because we wanted a little more rural atmosphere. We wanted a little more independent, you know, don't bug us kind of atmosphere, which we had seen in Montara and Moss Beach. And I think part of our board's responsibility is protecting the independence of this community, which is a different community. And I think that's a seriously important thing. I think it's important that people follow all the political issues in the papers and all the internet sites to learn what's happening, because this is a political community and there are a lot of pressures all the time. Years ago, I was speaking to one of the famous local environmentalists, and she said, Rick, you have to remember one thing: if everybody loves you on the coast, you're not doing your job. So I've made my enemies, and I'll stand by all of my stands. I think that Bob made some great comments about politics on the coast. And I think that if you're, you know, to become a board member, you just have to love your community. And that's the biggest thing. It's not knowledge of how sewer pipes work or anything like that. You pick that up. But if you like your community here, you want to defend your community here, getting on the board and helping the community is probably one of the best things you can do. So thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Really, really nicely said. Thank you. All right. I do want to bring up Clemens, the general manager here. He has a wealth of background working with the district and the board, and has his own perspective on what role the board plays for him as a general manager managing the district, being the staff member who's really operating the district, operating the systems. And I have a couple of questions for you as you get to the end of your introduction here, what you'll say, because we've had some audience questions. But Clemens, go ahead and introduce yourself and speak a little bit about what the board means to the general manager.
All right. Well, thanks again, Allison, for introducing me. Just want to say, so emigrating from Germany, not only to California, but particularly to this community, it feels a little bit like a never-ending vacation. And I say this because in my experience, that is true probably for every one of you guys as well. You've heard how the board is really identifying with the community. In my experience, everybody who lives out here wants to live out here. The fog probably keeps the wimps out. And really everybody enjoys living in the community. So I'm really the guy who is responsible for making sure that your water is safe and that your environment is protected through our sewer system. I'm glad that you could actually get a little bit of glimpse of how colorful my job is. You've seen finances, you've seen politics, You see there is a lot of water and sewer stuff, meaning digging ditches, looking at pipes, understanding pressures. A water system is like a living organism. Sometimes we feel like doctors having to deal with this. But generally, my role and my view of the board is definitely different than the board members. As it says here on the slide, is my role really is to serve as the hub between the board and the staff. So the board does set policies, and my job is to implement those policies with the help of our staff. And that is really what I do every day, and I have a wonderful time with it. One of the things that I've really enjoyed throughout this time is the discussions with the board, seeing how a board comes together and discusses things. Probably every time there is not a single opinion, there's 5 different opinions, and they may be close, but very often they're very far apart. So it's the process of sitting together at a table, having a discussion, listening to the others, and then coming to a joint conclusion. If a board makes a decision, every single board member, if they agreed with the decision beforehand or not, really has to melt with the decision, has to defend the decision, has to understand where the decision comes from. And I think this is witnessing democracy firsthand. So this is really a wonderful experience for me. Working for this small agency, we have an advantage being very close to our community. I think the biggest and most exciting experience for me was really seeing how the district evolved, particularly on the water side, from a system that was in almost in shambles. We had tanks running dry, water quality problems. Then the community got together, purchased the water system, and being part of fixing this up and making it now a state-of-the-art water system has been very exciting, and it is, of course, never ending. Thanks, Allison. So let's look at the questions that came in.
Yes. Well, Rick had one thing he wanted to mention while you were speaking. So Rick, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, thanks. I just wanted to say, everybody understands that the board and our director Clemens work on water and sewer, but that's not all we do. Recently, several citizens came to us and say, hey, you may not have noticed this, but San Francisco Public Utility Commission just chopped the top off of Montara Mountain. This is certainly not necessarily in our purview, but working with the local citizens, Clemens called the PUC folks, got them to the top of the mountain, got them to agree to back off on their project and restore the peak of Montara Mountain, which is a public hiking spot. So this was certainly above and beyond the call of duty of our requirement for good water and, you know, cleaning up the sewage. But it's very much fun and I think fulfilling when we can do stuff like that for the community too.
Thank you. Good point. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I just also wanted to mention that for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about what a position of a director involves, the board recently passed a code of ethics that very recently. So we're going to put this up on our website. And I think this is probably also a very interesting read for anyone who's interested in this position to understand what is actually expected from them.
Great, thank you. The couple of questions I have, I think I'll hold them till the end. They're really on the operation of the district in terms of fire and drought and water supply. And those are a bit more operational. I want to keep us moving on the aspects of the board role but we'll have time for those questions, and I'll bring them back up as we get to sort of the close here. Questions after I've got a couple more slides, and then I think I'd like to bring back those questions. Hopefully, Sandy, you can hold out while I get to those. So next aspect, I think you heard quite a bit of it, supporting the workforce and the work. Clemens mentioned he's the general manager, but we also have Tracy on tonight, the district clerk. This district is not a large number of employees. This is pretty much what you're seeing here. Again, with some consultants that support as needed. It's a small but highly effective team. And I think I'm going to turn over to Dwight now, because Dwight has some really great comments to be made about staff retention and working on policies and areas of board action that really supported ensuring the staff were here and would stay. So again, a 5-year elected director from 2012 to 2017, Dwight, if you can unmute yourself and give us a little insight into your experience and certainly staff, supporting staff and staff retention.
Well, first of all, hello to the entire board. Being last, I hope you haven't fallen asleep. And if you have, please wake up. And Bob, we have moved to Ashland, and I believe Grants Pass is a few miles north. I would probably say that I like Ashland better than Grants Pass, but we could have that discussion later. And I think the perspective I would like to bring, a couple perspectives. I was on the school board for 12 years as well. A lot of times what new board members, right, and existing board members are challenged by is the difference between governance and management. Clemens, you and I have had this discussion. You know, how do you separate what's the day-to-day operations and how do you separate governance? And it gets back to, I think, what Rick said is you don't have to know everything. And in fact, a governance model is really to take advantage of the expertise of those who work for the agency and basically look at the governance and responsibilities and goals and directives going forward. In fact, I think one of the key responsibilities of the board is to make sure that the staff members and people like Clemens feel like they're supported and that their needs are being met within the limits of the capacity of the agency. And a good example of that, Catherine, you and I had this discussion and we still may be in disagreement, but I think the idea is how do we make sure that our staff members are being reimbursed in such a way that they stay with us and that they become long-term employees, and what are the issues that are important to them? And at the end of the day, do we provide support to that group so that they can be operationally as high the capacity they are? So when it comes to governance, then we can reflect what's important to the district and how do we make those decisions and how do we go forward in relation to such. My last comment has to do with longevity and board turnover. I think there's some strength for the length of the board members, which clearly is part of this district. I also think that one of the challenges for this district is how do we bring folks in who feel comfortable in working with members who have been here for a very long period of time. And I think that's doable. I think the idea is to have, like what we're doing tonight, is to create the climate so that when people are interested in the board, it can be mentored by long-term board members. And then long-term board members can feel comfortable about, okay, I can move on to other issues so that we can bring new ideas and thoughts to the board. My takeaway or my summary in all this is that you don't have to be a content expert. I think that's been articulated. I think you need to make sure that your goals are in line with the community and that you don't lose sight of the fact that the people who are working for the board and the staff that are providing the product, meaning the sewer and water, are supported by what board members do. And I think I'll end it at that point.
Great, thank you, Dwight. Very much appreciated, especially from your distance in Oregon there. All right, I was going to just mention here, we've got just, I think, 2 more slides. So the Elected Community Service Academy, this was our first session here in July. And we do expect to do another one here in the fall. That one in the fall would be more focused on the election process, the candidate filings, the calendar, and all of the different aspects of running a campaign. That date's not yet set, but we'll make sure we publicize it like we did this. And then as we get into spring of next year, we're going to sort of refresh on this, recap, and ideally, if I can pull it together with district and board member help, We might try and do a little bit of a mock board, maybe with some of the students in the area or something of that nature, just to show that process from campaign to election to meeting. It could be a fun opportunity if we can get everyone engaged and part of that. So I'm going to turn here. My last slide is Scott to just give his perspective on this opportunity this evening, this academy. Some closing thoughts, and we will do questions right after Scott completes, so don't go away. But Scott, you want to add your thoughts here? 23 years as a director. I think if I've got this right, appointed in 1998 and then elected thereafter.
Thank you, Allison. It is such a delight to hear from board members, past and present, to see you all. And Dwight, sorry, you didn't actually get to go last. That's me, but I'm reminded, and I'll just call out, Dwight, I really learned a lot working with you. Your approach to certain issues was really different from what I had experienced before on certain topics. And I'm so pleased that there were some really difficult things that working with you, we got through kind of seamlessly, things that I wasn't sure how that was going to wind up. And I just count that as a real treat to have gotten to work with you on those things. So I moved to Montara in '94, and just boy, for the first time in my life, this is where roots went down, like roots to water. And then I found out that this Caltrans was planning on, bulldozing and blasting a freeway over the mountain, and I wound up getting involved in the tunnel campaign. And there I met people who just loved this place a lot. And after we had gotten through some of that, one of the directors on the board of what was then Montara Sanitary District asked me if, because he knew me from the work on the tunnel campaign, asked me if I would be interested in doing some volunteer work to help out the board. So I set about trying to figure out how on earth to get the district onto the World Wide Web. And it was a very manual effort back in the day. But that was fun, and I got to know the board. I got to come to meetings and go through agenda packets. And Rick pointed out, you don't start out knowing everything, but you pick it up along the way. And there's good people to work with, like George Irving, who was then our manager. Terrific guy. Learned a lot from him. Started learning from people like Bob and Catherine, and now gone Paul Perkovic and Chris Tholag as well. But a real honor to have worked with them. When a seat opened up, Chris encouraged me, "Hey, you've been volunteering. Why don't you stand for appointment?" And I did. And Chris then turned to lead the team to appoint a guy from a really good guy from Moss Beach. And so I just went back to working on the website and doing things like that. And then later, through some unfortunate events, that person needed to step back from that responsibility. And again, there was an opening. And once again, Chris is like, "Hey, why don't you put yourself forward?" So I did. And that time was appointed, and that was in 1998. And I have no idea where the time has gone, but over the years, I've had just the privilege to work with great staff like George and Clemens and Tracy and so many others who have worked in the office and on the crew. Quite a good set of board members, including everyone that you see here tonight. We've tackled some crazy, impossible things. A community of a little over 5,000 people telling an international water conglomerate, "You're not doing a good job with that water system. We're going to buy it from you." And them saying, "No, you're not." And here we are. We've now been managing this water system for something like 15 years. And it seems really impossible because it seemed like it took forever to get to the point where we could go to the public and ask to, "Are you willing to fund this?" And it's so exciting when I still remember standing outside the post office, holding up a sign about "Please vote yes on Measure V," and then keeping a careful eye on the election results and seeing that, what was it, 81% of the community said, "Let's do this thing, this crazy thing, let's go do it." And now we've got that local control. And over the years, worked with people of goodwill, people who love this place and love our community and are willing to work hard to take care of it and do good things for it. If you ever wonder if you have something in your life that's like just a good thing to do, this kind of public service, I look back on this and go, yep, this is a good thing. And largely because it's a team effort. And we learn things about the people who are different. I mean, people talking about differences, Bob said, I think, you know, I'm known to have an attitude. Well, I think it helps a little bit to bring an attitude to this thing and then to stick with it and sometimes duke it out. And Bob made us work harder and we made Bob work harder. And that's been true, I think, of all of us. There's no one here that I haven't had some difficult disagreement with, except for Tracy. I've never had a disagreement with Tracy. But, you know, when we have passionate thoughts about what's right, what the best way to do things, and then we put our heads together and we finally get down to where we finally vote on something, you know, in the end, after countless votes, most all of the votes, despite wherever we started on the agreement spectrum, almost all of them were 5-0. That's because we stuck with it and talked to each other and listened to each other. And even if we wound up on the losing side of a vote, we've always worked together as a team to say, all right, well, that's what we've decided. Let's go make that successful. This is a precious opportunity. And we're having this meeting tonight and the next couple of them because one of the duties and responsibilities of a board member is to think about succession planning. And as has been pointed out, some of us have been at this for a while, and we welcome interest in participation, whether it's volunteer work or if you want to step up and run for office. We're very eager to meet you, work with you, and see where this community takes this agency. So thank you very much for joining us and participating in this tonight. And I look forward to, like Chris did with me, encouraging you or someone you may know into this kind of public service. This is a fine thing to do, and we welcome the interest.
Thank you, Scott. All right, I have one other. Catherine wants to mention one thing more before I want to make sure we have time for questions. And particularly, I've got two questions I want to get answered. But Catherine, if you can give us your brief mention that you wanted to introduce.
I wanted to give a special shout out and thanks to Lou Wall, who was on the board and has been a very valuable participant in our meetings from bringing all kinds of historical and common sense perspectives to the board over the years. Lou was on the board at some very sensitive times, and when those of us who were on the board and didn't know about the history, he was always willing to bring us up to speed on what the history of the board is. And I think every single member on the board now and past board members are willing and excited to be able to tell people about what a phenomenal community this is, what kind of history this board has made. But again, a special shout out to Lou Wall, who's still here and available for questions. He's just somebody who made it a point to sit in our board meetings twice a month for years and years and years. And I can't begin to tell everybody how great his value is to our district. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, we've come to the questions, thoughts part of the evening. I will bring up, and this is Clemens, you're on the spot here. We had a couple of questions that were more about operations of the district. I will mention that we did a virtual tour. So for those who may not have seen it, that is on the website, the Montara Water and Sanitary website. You can see a virtual tour of the operations of the district. We also did a couple of sessions on different areas of the district operations and future planning. Bill, I see your hand. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get Sandy's questions out first. So Sandy's are more operational. So Clemens, with the aquifer levels threatened with 4 years of drought, and what's being done to educate, what is being done to educate, assist residents in setting up systems and implement community-wide rain catchment for outdoor watering use, increase above ground water storage, and stress community education on reduction efforts. So generally, what's the situation with the water supply in Montara and the efforts to engage folks on conservation and considering the drought?
Yeah, first of all, apologies, background noise. So what we're currently, first of all, the preparation started essentially with the purchase of the water system. So we are in a community that has experience with running out of water. Back then, the head of the DWR were pretty much after the time that the head of the DWR in the 2010s essentially recommended that all water systems move towards having their own water system, their own water sources. And this is something that we in the community have. We own all of our water sources. We control our water. This is something that is absolutely not to underestimate. This allowed us to plan long-term for drought scenarios like the one that we're in right now. For example, other water agencies do not necessarily have limits on how many connections they can sell, how much water is available. We don't have really a plan to implement a moratorium whatsoever. We will not run out of water. However, we work with planning agencies to ensure that what is done in the community is not exceeding what we can provide. With the repeal of the moratorium, we ultimately had to set 50% of what is called the available water supply. Now, the available water supply is already an estimate that is far reduced. So 50% of our water that was available had to be set aside for drought contingencies. So we feel we're very well prepared to face the current drought and the coming years. I think it's really important to understand, of course, that this is a severe situation that is changing. The changes are due to climate change, and that is something that is going to continue. So we have to continue stepping up to the plate, looking for new sources wherever we can. Also something that we started years ago that we're currently in the process. You see, for example, that we're looking, we had some sessions where we pointed out that we're looking at available properties in the community, available water supply. We negotiate. We're in the process of talking to Caltrans. Went and negotiated a entry permit with them, drilled test wells, found water that is available on the Caltrans right of way, and would like to acquire it. So these are really all preparations that started long ago. Now that we're in the situation, this is of benefit to us. However, we cannot stop. So if it starts raining, most folks will forget that there was a drought. We are not forgetting this. We continue looking for new sources, preparing for whatever comes. And I hope I answered the question best as I can.
Thank you. All right, I know that we had one other question that I held, and then I have one hand raised. So this next question is regarding fire. If a fire hits Montara, do we have enough water stored at all times to assist CAL FIRE in fighting what might be a horrendous fire due to the large and numerous groves of eucalyptus trees? Would additional water storage be warranted? So Clemens, I know we've spoken about this before at other meetings. Can you speak a little bit about fire story about fire supply, firefighting supply, and really the expectation of the system for domestic
Yeah.
fire versus wildland fire.
Sure. The short answer is no, we don't have enough water. Wildfires, water systems are not designed to fight wildfires. The wildfires that we've seen, the large ones some years ago in Santa Rosa, in Paradise, have shown, for example, also that a water system is completely ineffective to fight these fires. As far as I understand, there was not a single hydrant that was opened in either one of these two fires. It's impossible. The fire is too fast. The fires are too strong. This is a new situation. CAL FIRE, for example, does not use city water systems to fight forest fires. We have, however, a large advantage, and that's the ocean in front of our door. So there is a large water source available that CAL FIRE can access. There are lakes on the peninsula that also can serve that purpose. And that is what really CAL FIRE is utilizing to fight large wildfires. Water systems, city water systems are designed to fight house fires. That means 1, 2, 3, 4 homes, large structures burning. And we do have enough water for that purpose. Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you. Bill Softkey, you, if I've got that last name right, you have been very patient. Did you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, first of all, I'm delighted to see so many local government aficionados actually able to come to something as antiseptic as a Zoom thing just to sort of boost local government. The reason I say that is my mom, Marion Softkey, was an OG environmentalist around here. So I grew up hearing about LAFCO and about the Montara Reserve and Caltrans and the tunnels and Ollie Mayer and all. There's all sorts of coastside stuff that her 40 years of reporting for the Country Almanac just got into me. And this sounds like the best version of it. I mean, I like how I didn't know the cool story behind the local water supply. But so I'm impressed with everything you're saying. I totally buy your premise. I'm just wondering, what openings are there over the next how many years, and at what time does one need to actually start making a decision to do this thing or not?
I like it. So number one, I'm going to answer a question of what the timing is, and Clemens can help me and others can help me, but definitely the next session, when we do this next fall session, that will talk about the election calendar and candidacy filing and all of those different pieces so that you can fit into the election. Clemens or Scott, maybe help me out in terms of, we have board members that come up for re-election next year. Will you have seats open?
It's every 2 years on the even numbered years. So it typically works that one of those 2 seats are up and the other 3 seats are up. There is an exception. If anyone sitting in a seat has been appointed, they must stand for re-election at the next election, regardless of the length of the term that they sat in to replace. So, for example, I was appointed back in '98. I had to stand in the next election for that seat if I wanted to continue working. So that means there'll be an election next year. And I apologize. I don't remember if that's 2 or 3 seats open next year, but anytime the election happens, anybody in the community who's in the district can run. And then if there happens to be an opening, then the word goes out to the community. And in fact, not that long ago, when we appointed Peter, a number of people, including Bob Patasek, showed up and expressed willingness to serve. The board heard from everyone, had a discussion, and then made a selection. So those do come up from time to time. And Peter's one who stepped into the breach. Jim did. I did. I don't know. Catherine, was yours first an election or an appointment?
There were 5 candidates running for 3 seats, and I came in second.
So I hope that answers your question, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Thanks for
wanna
asking. And I've read some of your mom's stuff, and the almanac always had great stuff. That was one of my go-tos.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just want to briefly clarify that there's 3 seats open in the next election, November 22.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I didn't have that information at my fingertips. That was planned for my next Academy session, but thank you. All right, I think those are all the questions I've seen. Are there any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, shout a question. If not, seeing not any others at this time, I do want to say thank you so much. I think timing wise, this is my last slide that says, hey, we're towards the end. If you have any questions, you can always reach out. I do think timing wise, we hit a very good note here. It's just before 8 o'clock, so that's an hour and a half. I really appreciate all of you folks. If anybody, again, any questions, feel free, chime in, but if not,
There's one more thing. One more thing,
you have to
Allison.
close this. Yes, go for it,
This is
Scott.
a public meeting, and we're talking about board roles and responsibilities. So as president or whoever's presiding over a meeting, you get to call the meeting to order and you get to adjourn the meeting. So looking at the agenda, which is perhaps the hardest part, is remembering to read the agenda and do the items in order. But never fear, it's a team effort. Someone will always point out, hey, Scott, you skipped one. We have no reports. We don't have any need to talk about future agendas tonight. We have no closed session. So if I hear no objection, we are adjourned with our thanks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. It was
Very
awesome.
much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Ready?
Stop the roll.